In the heart of a luxurious first-class cabin, where appearances are everything, one unassuming man with a lunchbox becomes the center of judgment, until turbulence reveals a truth no one saw coming. Watch till the end to witness the moment that left everyone speechless. The boarding gate at JFK Airport buzzed with the usual pre-flight chaos. Business executives, vacationers, and frequent flyers shuffled through security checks, some clutching their carry-ons while others scrolled through phones. The queue for the luxurious Sky-High Airways first class was notably shorter, populated by sharply dressed passengers exuding confidence. Among them stood Marcus Langston. His unassuming presence didn't match the glittering aura of his fellow travelers. Dressed in a simple grey hoodie, jeans and sneakers, Marcus blended into the crowd. His only noticeable accessory was a modest, slightly worn lunchbox he carried in one hand. Passengers brushed past him without a second glance. Inside the cabin, Kelly Peterson adjusted her uniform for the 5th time. The sharp navy suit and golden pin of Sky-High Airways were symbols of prestige she took seriously. She prided herself on delivering premium service, but her ambition often came with an air of superiority. Kelly considered herself an expert at reading people, judging their worth with a glance. As Marcus entered the first-class cabin, Kelly's well-trained smile faltered. "Good afternoon, sir," she said with forced politeness, glancing at the lunchbox. Her colleague, Amanda, gave her a quick nudge. "First class," Kelly whispered to Amanda once Marcus was out of earshot. "And he's carrying that?" Amanda, more tolerant, replied softly, "Maybe he just likes his own food. Let it go." Marcus settled into seat 3A, oblivious to, or perhaps ignoring, the murmurs around him. The first-class cabin was as opulent as expected: plush leather seats, personal monitors, and champagne flutes awaiting passengers. Marcus placed his lunchbox on the side table, his movements unhurried. Kelly couldn't help but glance at him repeatedly as she assisted other passengers. She noticed every detail, from the scuffs on his sneakers to the simplicity of his clothing. Her assumptions began to solidify. He didn't belong here. "Sir," Kelly addressed Marcus curtly after a while, "would you like a welcome drink? Champagne, perhaps?" Her tone hinted at skepticism. Marcus looked up, his gaze steady but kind. "Just water, please." Kelly hesitated, then walked away with a barely concealed smirk. "Water," she muttered to Amanda, shaking her head. "Why even bother flying first class if you're going to act like you're in economy?" Amanda sighed, but said nothing. Kelly's sharp tongue was nothing new. The remaining passengers boarded without incident, and the crew prepared for takeoff. Kelly, still preoccupied with Marcus, found herself scanning his actions. When he opened his lunchbox to retrieve a small book, she scoffed quietly to herself. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Kelly made her rounds, greeting passengers and offering amenities. When she reached Marcus again, she noticed the open lunchbox on his tray. Inside were neatly packed homemade sandwiches, a small container of fruit, and a folded napkin with the initials ML embroidered on the corner. The sight amused her. "Interesting choice for first-class dining," Kelly quipped as she refilled his water glass. Marcus glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "It's a special meal," he replied simply, before returning to his book. Kelly's curiosity was piqued, but her assumptions remained intact. She whispered to Amanda later, "What kind of special meal fits in a lunchbox? I can't believe people like him make it to first class." "Maybe he has a reason," Amanda said. "Not everyone's flashy." Kelly rolled her eyes and continued her duties. Throughout the flight, she noticed Marcus interacting little with the other passengers. He read quietly, occasionally jotting notes in a leather-bound journal. His demeanor remained calm, almost unnervingly so, even as Kelly made subtle remarks about his budget meal to passengers within earshot. Yet Marcus didn't react. If he heard her, he showed no sign. Near the end of the meal service, Kelly walked past Marcus's seat again. She couldn't resist commenting one last time. "Sir, if you'd like to try something a bit more fitting for first class, we have caviar and champagne available." Marcus set his book down and smiled. "Thank you, but this is perfect for me." His tone was so genuine that Kelly felt momentarily disarmed. Still, she couldn't let go of her initial judgments. Amanda gave Kelly a disapproving look as she overheard the exchange. "You're pushing it," she warned. Kelly shrugged, unbothered. "He'll survive." As the cabin lights dimmed for the overnight flight, Marcus leaned back in his seat, his lunchbox now tucked away. Kelly observed him one last time before retreating to the galley. Something about his calmness unsettled her, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. Marcus, however, remained entirely unbothered, a small smile playing on his lips as he looked out of the window into the night sky. The cabin had settled into the rhythm of a long-haul flight. Most passengers reclined in their spacious seats enjoying films, reading, or quietly sipping on cocktails. The faint hum of the engines filled the cabin, a comforting white noise for frequent travelers. Kelly resumed her routine, moving through the aisles with practiced ease. But her thoughts kept drifting back to Marcus. It wasn't just the lunchbox or his simple attire, it was the way he carried himself, calm, collected, and unaffected by her remarks. It irritated her. She was used to passengers reacting in some way, either with defensiveness or meek apologies, but Marcus had done neither. "He's too comfortable," Kelly muttered to herself while preparing coffee in the galley. Amanda, standing beside her, overheard. "Maybe he's comfortable because he belongs here," she said, pouring cream into a passenger's order. "Come on," Kelly replied, lowering her voice. "Look at him. First class is for people who've earned it, people who show it. He doesn't even look like he's flown before." Amanda sighed. "You don't know his story. Maybe he's saved up for years, or maybe he flies under the radar. Either way, it's not our job to judge." Kelly shrugged, dismissing the thought, and returned to her rounds. But Amanda's words lingered in the back of her mind. What was his story? Why didn't he fit the mold of her usual first-class passengers? Midway through the flight, the plane hit a patch of turbulence. The cabin lights flickered briefly, and the seatbelt sign chimed on. Passengers who had been stretching or making their way to the lavatories hurriedly returned to their seats. Kelly's voice came over the intercom, calm and professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing some turbulence. Please fasten your seatbelts and remain seated until the captain turns off the sign." The turbulence grew worse, causing the plane to jolt. A nervous murmur rippled through the cabin. Marcus, sitting quietly with his book, glanced up and instinctively placed his hand on the armrest. He appeared calm, but his sharp eyes darted around the cabin, assessing the situation. Kelly moved quickly, checking that passengers were secure in their seats. As she passed Marcus, she noticed him studying the overhead compartments and the faint vibrations beneath the floor. "Sir, everything is under control," she said curtly, catching his gaze. "Please remain seated." Marcus gave her a small nod, but said nothing. In the cockpit, the pilots were working to stabilize the aircraft. A minor technical glitch in the autopilot system had caused the turbulence to intensify. They communicated calmly but with urgency, discussing options as they adjusted controls manually. Meanwhile, in the cabin, Kelly noticed Marcus writing something in his journal. He tore out a page, folded it, and signaled Amanda. Amanda leaned down as Marcus handed her the note. "Can you pass this to the captain? It's urgent." Kelly, watching from a few steps away, stepped in. "What is that?" she asked, her tone sharp. Marcus met her gaze evenly. "Something that might help." Help, Kelly repeated, incredulous. Sir, the pilots are highly trained professionals. They don't need suggestions from passengers. Amanda hesitated, unsure of what to do. It's fine, Marcus said calmly. But if you'd rather not take it, I can explain it myself once the turbulence clears. Kelly smirked. Explain? Are you an expert on aviation now? Marcus's steady expression didn't waver. Actually, yes. Kelly froze for a moment, thrown off by his confident reply. Amanda, sensing the tension, took the note. I'll pass it on, she said quickly, leaving before Kelly could object further. In the cockpit, the co-pilot unfolded Marcus's note. It contained a concise series of suggestions referencing technical jargon that immediately caught his attention. The captain glanced over and nodded, recognizing the logic. Who sent this? The captain asked. A passenger in 3A, Amanda said, still uncertain. Interesting, the co-pilot muttered. These adjustments make sense. Let's try them. Within minutes, the turbulence eased and the plane stabilized. The pilots exchanged relieved glances, quietly impressed by the note's accuracy. Amanda returned to the cabin, passing Kelly on her way. The pilot said his suggestions worked, she whispered. Kelly's jaw tightened. What? They're asking who he is. Apparently, he knows his stuff. Kelly looked over at Marcus, who sat calmly, resuming his book as though nothing had happened. For the first time, doubt crept into her mind. Who was this man? And how did he know how to help with a technical issue most passengers wouldn't understand? As the flight returned to normal, Kelly found herself unable to shake the strange turn of events. She kept glancing at Marcus, replaying their interactions in her mind, her dismissive remarks, her judgmental attitude. It wasn't just that he had proven her wrong, it was the quiet confidence with which he had done so. He hadn't gloated, argued, or even sought recognition. And yet somehow he had become the most intriguing person on the flight. Maybe he's some kind of engineer, Kelly said to Amanda during a brief break in the galley. Or more than that, Amanda replied, sipping her coffee. He didn't even flinch during the turbulence. You have to admit, there's something about him. Kelly said nothing, her irritation now mingled with curiosity. As the plane cruised on toward its destination, Kelly resolved to learn more about Marcus. She began observing him more closely, noting how other passengers seemed to notice him too. There was an aura about him, not showy or loud, but quietly commanding. Marcus, for his part, appeared completely unaware of the attention. He continued reading, occasionally jotting notes in his journal. When he caught Kelly watching him, he smiled faintly and returned to his book, leaving her more perplexed than ever. For the first time, Kelly began to wonder if she had made a mistake. The flight continued smoothly after the turbulence subsided, but Kelly's mind was far from calm. She couldn't shake the events that had unfolded. Marcus, the quiet man she had dismissed, had not only kept his composure but had seemingly solved a problem the flight crew couldn't handle on their own. In the galley, Amanda leaned against the counter, observing Kelly's restless movements. "You've been watching him," Amanda said. Kelly paused. "I just don't get it. Who carries a lunchbox into first class, saves the day with a note, and then acts like it's nothing?" Amanda raised an eyebrow. "Why does it matter?" "Because I want to know who he really is," Kelly admitted. Her tone was defensive, but beneath it was genuine curiosity. "He doesn't fit?" Amanda chuckled. "Maybe that's your problem. You're too busy trying to fit people into neat little boxes. Not everyone's so simple." Kelly didn't respond. She walked back into the cabin, her gaze flicking toward Marcus in seat 3A. He was still engrossed in his journal, pen moving steadily across the page. His calmness unsettled her. As Kelly continued serving passengers, She stopped at the seat of an older woman, Mrs. Palmer, who was knitting quietly. The woman beckoned her over. "Excuse me, dear, but I must say that gentleman over there," she said, nodding toward Marcus, "is quite fascinating." Kelly forced a smile. "Oh? What makes you say that?" "I spoke with him briefly before we boarded," Mrs. Palmer continued. "Such a kind man, very humble. I asked what he does for a living, and he just smiled and said, 'A little of everything.' Isn't that intriguing?" Kelly bit her lip, trying to suppress her skepticism. "I suppose." Mrs. Palmer's eyes twinkled. "He has the air of someone who's seen the world, doesn't he? You should talk to him." "I'm here to serve the passengers, not chat," Kelly replied curtly, though the idea lingered in her mind. Shortly after, Marcus closed his journal and leaned back in his seat. As Kelly walked past, he looked up. "Excuse me," he said, his tone polite. She stopped, surprised. "Yes?" "Would you happen to have a cup of tea, something light like chamomile?" Kelly nodded quickly. "Of course." As she returned to the galley to prepare his tea, Kelly's thoughts raced. This was her chance to engage him, find out more without being obvious. When she returned with the steaming cup, she hesitated before setting it down. "Here you are, sir," she said, her voice softening. "Thank you," Marcus replied with a warm smile. He gestured to the seat across from him. "You've been working hard. Why don't you sit for a moment?" Kelly blinked, caught off guard. Passengers rarely extended such invitations. She glanced around, ensuring no one else needed her, then carefully lowered herself into the seat. "Long flight," Marcus said casually, sipping his tea. "You must be on your feet all day." "It's part of the job," Kelly replied, trying to sound professional. She hesitated, then added, "You don't seem like the typical first-class passenger." Marcus smiled. "And what's the typical passenger like?" Kelly faltered. "Well, I mean, most people up here dress a certain way, carry certain things." She glanced at his lunchbox. "You're different." Marcus laughed softly. "Different isn't always a bad thing." Kelly shifted in her seat, unsure how to continue. "What do you do?" she asked finally, her curiosity getting the better of her. "I work in transportation," Marcus replied vaguely. Kelly frowned. "Transportation? Like logistics?" "Something like that," Marcus said, his tone light. He leaned forward slightly. "What about you? How long have you been with Sky High Airways?" 5 years, Kelly said. "It's a demanding job, but I like it." "I can imagine," Marcus said. "First-class passengers must keep you on your toes." Kelly smiled faintly, unsure if he was teasing her. "Some more than others?" Marcus's expression grew thoughtful. "It must be interesting, meeting people from all walks of life." "It is," Kelly admitted. "You get to see all kinds of people. Some are surprising." Marcus tilted his head. "Like me?" Kelly flushed slightly, caught off guard. "I didn't mean—" "It's all right," Marcus said, holding up a hand. "I don't take offense. First impressions can be deceiving." For a moment, Kelly felt a pang of guilt. She had judged him harshly, and now, sitting across from him, she realized there was more to him than she'd assumed. As Kelly rose to return to her duties, Marcus said, "Thank you for the tea and for the conversation." Kelly nodded, feeling an unusual sense of unease. It wasn't often that a passenger left her feeling out of her depth. Back in the galley, Amanda gave her a knowing look. "How'd it go?" Kelly shrugged, trying to seem indifferent. "He's polite." "And," Amanda pressed. Kelly hesitated. "And, I don't know, there's something about him." Amanda smirked. "Told you he's not what you think." As the flight progressed, Kelly couldn't help but replay her conversation with Marcus. His words, his calm demeanor, his vagueness, It all gnawed at her. Who was he really, and why did it bother her so much? Meanwhile, Marcus remained a puzzle. He interacted little with the other passengers, but those who did speak with him seemed drawn to his quiet charm. Even Mrs. Palmer, who rarely engaged with anyone, spent time chatting with him about her grandchildren. By the time the plane began its descent, Kelly was no closer to solving the mystery of Marcus Langston. But she knew one thing: she had underestimated him. The cabin lights dimmed as the flight approached its final leg. The announcement from the cockpit was brief: clear skies ahead, with an estimated landing time just before sunset. Passengers adjusted their seats, packed away belongings, and prepared for arrival. But Kelly's mind was elsewhere. She couldn't stop thinking about Marcus. Everything about him felt out of place, yet entirely in control. It unnerved her how easily he had turned her assumptions into questions she couldn't answer. As Kelly checked on passengers one last time, she overheard Mrs. Palmer chatting with Marcus. The older woman leaned toward him, her voice barely audible but warm with curiosity. "I swear, young man, I've seen your face somewhere. Are you in politics?" Marcus chuckled softly. "No, ma'am, nothing like that." "Television, then?" she pressed. "No," Marcus replied, his tone easygoing. "Just a familiar face, I suppose." Mrs. Palmer smiled, unconvinced, but unwilling to push further. Kelly lingered nearby, pretending to adjust a passenger's blanket while straining to hear the exchange. As Marcus leaned back in his seat, his eyes caught Kelly's. There it was again, that calm, knowing smile. It wasn't smug or confrontational, but it left her feeling exposed, as though he saw right through her. In the galley, Amanda was preparing drinks for a few final requests when Kelly stormed in. "I don't get him," Kelly blurted, her voice lower, but laced with frustration. Amanda turned, surprised. "Who?" "Him," Kelly said, gesturing toward the first-class cabin. "Marcus, or whatever his name is." Amanda smirked. "You're obsessed." "I'm not," Kelly snapped, though her tone betrayed her. "I just don't understand him. He's too calm, too vague, and everyone seems to love him." "Maybe because he's a decent person," Amanda suggested with a shrug. "You're overthinking this." Kelly sighed, leaning against the counter. "He's hiding something. I can feel it." Amanda laughed. "Not everyone is hiding some grand secret, Kelly. Maybe he's just not flashy. You know, like a normal person." Kelly shook her head. "It's not that simple." When Kelly returned to the cabin, Marcus was standing near the aisle, stretching. The sight surprised her. He moved with a quiet confidence that seemed at odds with his modest appearance. "Stretching your legs before landing?" Kelly asked, trying to sound casual. Marcus nodded. "Long flights can be tough." "I'm sure you've been on plenty," she said, fishing for more information. Marcus smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised." Kelly hesitated, then decided to take a risk. "Mrs. Palmer seems to think she's seen you before." "She's kind," Marcus replied simply, his expression unreadable. Kelly pressed on. "She's not the only one." "You seem familiar?" Marcus tilted his head slightly as though considering her words. "Or maybe I just remind people of someone they know." The ambiguity of his response frustrated Kelly, but before she could respond, the seatbelt sign chimed on, signaling the final descent. Marcus returned to his seat without another word. As the plane touched down smoothly on the tarmac, the passengers applauded, a rare but heartfelt gesture of relief. The crew began their post-landing duties, preparing the cabin for disembarkation. Kelly kept glancing at Marcus, who showed no urgency in gathering his belongings. He sat patiently, waiting for the aisles to clear, his lunchbox perched neatly on his tray table. "Thank you for flying with us," Kelly said automatically as passengers filed past her. Each one offered polite nods or murmured farewells, but her attention remained on seat 3A. When Marcus finally stood to leave, Kelly couldn't resist addressing him one last time. "I hope you enjoyed your flight, Mr. Langston," she said, her tone carefully neutral. Marcus looked at her, his gaze steady but kind. "I did. Thank you for your service." He paused, then added, "Have a good evening." The simplicity of his words disarmed her. Before she could respond, he was gone, disappearing into the bustling terminal with the same quiet confidence that had defined him throughout the flight. As the crew completed their duties and prepared to disembark, Kelly found herself feeling restless. She had no answers, only more questions. Who was Marcus Langston, and why did he feel so familiar? Amanda joined her at the gate, handing over a clipboard. "You okay?" Kelly nodded absently. "Yeah, just thinking." Amanda smirked. "Still about him?" Kelly didn't answer. Instead, she looked out at the terminal, watching the passengers disperse. Somewhere in the crowd, Marcus was walking away, and with him, the mystery she couldn't unravel. As Kelly exited the plane with the rest of the crew, she passed by a group of ground staff gathered near the terminal entrance. They were murmuring excitedly, holding what looked like printed photographs. "Is that him?" one of them whispered, pointing toward a distant figure. Kelly slowed her pace, straining to hear. "Yeah, that's him," another staff member said. "Marcus Langston. Can you believe he owns the whole airline?" Kelly froze. The words hit her like a shockwave. She turned toward the figure they were pointing at, but Marcus was already disappearing into the crowd. For a moment, Kelly couldn't move. The man she had judged, dismissed, and mocked had been the owner of the very airline she worked for. Kelly stood frozen in the bustling terminal, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Marcus Langston, Mr. Lunchbox as she had privately dubbed him, was the billionaire owner of Sky High Airways. The man she had mocked and dismissed had been quietly observing everything, including her. Amanda noticed Kelly lagging behind and nudged her. "Hey, you all right?" Kelly snapped out of her daze and forced a nod. "Yeah, just tired." Amanda raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Let's just get to the crew lounge," Kelly mumbled, avoiding further questions. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of disbelief and regret. Once inside the crew lounge, Kelly sank into one of the chairs, her mind racing. Amanda grabbed a coffee and sat across from her, watching curiously. "You've been weird ever since we landed," Amanda said. "What's going on?" Kelly hesitated, unsure whether to share what she'd overheard. Finally, she leaned in, lowering her voice. "Marcus Langston, he owns the airline." Amanda blinked, then laughed. "What? That guy? Are you serious?" "I heard the ground staff talking about it," Kelly said. Her tone clipped. "He's the owner. The billionaire owner." Amanda's expression shifted from amusement to shock. "You're joking?" "I wish I was," Kelly muttered, leaning back in her chair. The enormity of her actions throughout the flight hit her like a wave. Her dismissive comments, her snide remarks about his lunchbox, all of it replayed in her mind. Amanda whistled low. "Well, that explains a lot." Kelly glared at her. "What's that supposed to mean?" "His confidence," Amanda said, shrugging. "The way he didn't react to anything you said. He probably deals with people like you all the time." Kelly bristled. "People like me?" "You know what I mean," Amanda said, softening her tone. "You judged him? Admit it?" Kelly looked away, her cheeks flushing. "I didn't know." "That's the point," Amanda said. "You didn't know, but you assumed." Kelly couldn't deny it. She had judged Marcus from the moment he stepped onto the plane. His simple clothes, his lunchbox, his calm demeanor. It had all seemed so out of place in first class. But now, Knowing who he was, those same traits took on a different meaning. They weren't signs of someone who didn't belong. They were the marks of someone who didn't need to prove anything. Her stomach churned as she thought back to their interactions. She had mocked his lunchbox, belittled his presence, and questioned his worth, all while he remained composed, watching quietly. "Do you think he noticed?" Kelly asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Amanda gave her a pointed look. "Of course he noticed." Kelly buried her face in her hands. "This is bad." "It's not great," Amanda admitted, "but maybe he'll let it slide. Didn't seem like the type to hold a grudge." Kelly wasn't so sure. Billionaires didn't get to where they were by ignoring details. If Marcus Langston had been evaluating the service on his airline, she had likely failed spectacularly. As Kelly gathered her belongings to leave the lounge, one of the supervisors approached her. He held an envelope with her name written neatly on the front. "This came for you," he said, handing it over. Kelly stared at the envelope, her heart pounding. "Who's it from?" The supervisor shrugged. "No idea. A courier dropped it off." With trembling hands, Kelly opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note. First impressions are powerful, but they're not everything. What matters is what you do next. ML. Kelly read the note twice, her pulse racing. It was brief, but the message was clear. Marcus Langston had noticed everything, and yet he wasn't condemning her. Instead, he was giving her a chance to reflect and grow. Amanda peeked over her shoulder. "What's that?" Kelly folded the note quickly. "Nothing," she said, stuffing it into her bag. That evening, Kelly sat in her small apartment, the note still in her hands. She couldn't shake the memory of Marcus's calm gaze or the quiet dignity with which he carried himself. He had every right to call her out publicly, to embarrass her the way she had tried to embarrass him. But he hadn't. Instead, he had chosen to leave her with a lesson. For the first time, Kelly confronted the harsh truth about herself. She prided herself on professionalism, but her behavior toward Marcus had been anything but professional. She had let her biases dictate her actions, and it had nearly cost her more than just her dignity. The lunchbox, once a symbol of her mockery, now felt like a symbol of something far greater. It represented Marcus's humility, his roots, and his quiet defiance of societal expectations. Kelly realized that she could learn a lot from someone like him, if she was willing to change. The next morning, Kelly arrived at the airport earlier than usual. She had spent the night reflecting on her actions, and while the memory still stung, she was determined to move forward. Marcus's words echoed in her mind. What matters is what you do next. As she prepared for her next flight, Kelly resolved to treat every passenger with respect, regardless of their appearance or behavior. She couldn't undo what had happened with Marcus, but she could ensure it never happened again. Amanda noticed the change immediately. "You seem different," she remarked as they boarded the plane. "Just trying something new," Kelly said with a small smile. Amanda grinned. "Well, whatever it is, I like it." As the passengers began boarding, Kelly greeted each one warmly, her tone genuine and unhurried. For the first time, she felt no urge to judge or categorize them. Instead, she saw each person as an individual with their own story she might never fully understand. And in the back of her mind, she hoped that someday she might have the chance to thank Marcus Langston for the lesson he had taught her. The weeks following Kelly's encounter with Marcus Langston brought subtle but noticeable changes. Her new approach to passengers, treating them with respect and genuine interest, didn't go unnoticed. Passengers responded warmly, and her interactions with the crew became less tense. But beneath the surface, Kelly couldn't shake the lingering weight of her past actions. One morning, as Kelly walked through the airport terminal to her gate, she spotted a familiar face in a newsstand. It was Marcus Langston's, on the cover of Business Today. The headline read, "The Silent Visionary, How Marcus Langston Built Sky-High Airways into an Empire." Kelly picked up the magazine, flipping through the article. It detailed Marcus's rise from humble beginnings to becoming one of the most influential figures in aviation. The story painted a picture of resilience, intelligence, and unwavering commitment to his values. The article also highlighted his tendency to travel incognito, immersing himself in the passenger experience to better understand his business. Her chest tightened as she read a section that seemed almost tailored to her. Langston believes the true measure of success lies in humility and how one treats others, regardless of status or wealth. The words echoed in her mind. She purchased the magazine and tucked it into her bag, feeling both inspired and ashamed. The reminder of Marcus's values pushed her further toward introspection. A few days later, the Sky High crew received a surprising announcement. The airline was hosting a special meeting for first-class staff to discuss improving service standards. Kelly and Amanda attended, curious but apprehensive. The meeting was held in an elegant conference room at a nearby hotel. As the crew settled in, the head of customer experience, Mr. Reynolds, addressed the group. "We're here today to talk about elevating the passenger experience," he began, "and to help us with that, we have a special guest." Kelly's stomach dropped as Marcus Langston walked into the room. The murmurs in the room grew louder. Kelly froze, her heart pounding. She hadn't expected to see him again, let alone in this setting. Marcus, dressed in a crisp but understated suit, greeted the group with a warm smile. "Thank you all for being here," Marcus began, his tone calm and approachable. "I wanted to speak to you directly because your work is at the heart of what makes Sky High special." Marcus spoke about his philosophy, emphasizing the importance of treating every passenger with dignity and respect. He shared anecdotes from his travels, including instances where small gestures from crew members had left lasting impressions. "You never know who's sitting in front of you," Marcus said, his gaze sweeping the room. "But you always have the power to make someone's journey better or worse. It's a responsibility we all share." His words landed heavily on Kelly. She felt as though he was speaking directly to her, though his tone remained kind and encouraging. After the meeting, Marcus stayed behind to answer questions and speak with the crew. Kelly lingered near the back, torn between the urge to approach him and the fear of facing him again. Amanda nudged her. "Go talk to him." Kelly hesitated. "What would I even say?" "You'll regret it if you don't," Amanda replied. "Just thank him. He's clearly not holding a grudge." Summoning her courage, Kelly approached Marcus as he finished a conversation with another crew member. He turned to her with the same calm expression she remembered. "Mr. Langston," she began, her voice unsteady. I just wanted to say thank you." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "For what?" "For the note you left me," Kelly said, meeting his gaze. "And for being kind. You could have humiliated me, but you didn't. I've been trying to do better since that flight." Marcus's expression softened. "I appreciate that, Kelly. It takes strength to reflect and grow." Kelly exhaled, relief washing over her. "I made a lot of assumptions about you. I'm sorry for how I treated you." "You've apologized," Marcus said. "Now the real question is, what are you doing with what you've learned?" "I'm trying," Kelly said sincerely. "Every day." Marcus nodded. "Then you're on the right path." As Kelly left the meeting, she felt lighter. For the first time since that flight, she believed she could move forward without the shadow of her mistakes hanging over her. Marcus's words had given her not just clarity, but a sense of purpose. Over the following months, Kelly's transformation became evident. Her interactions with passengers became more personal and thoughtful. Her newfound attitude influenced her colleagues, creating a more welcoming environment in the first-class cabin. Even Amanda commented on the change. "I don't know what happened at that meeting, but you're like a whole new person," she said one day. Kelly smiled. "Just trying to do the right thing." Her reputation among the crew grew, and soon she was offered a mentorship role for new flight attendants. It was a small but significant step, one she knew Marcus would approve of. One evening, as Kelly prepared for a long-haul flight to London, she noticed a familiar name on the passenger list: Marcus Langston. Her heart skipped a beat. It had been months since their last encounter, and she wondered how he would perceive her now. This time, she resolved to do more than just serve him tea. She would show him, through her actions, that she had truly changed. The flight to London was set to be a busy one, with a full first-class cabin and a demanding itinerary. Kelly, now months into her transformation, felt ready for the challenge. But when she saw Marcus Langston's name on the manifest, her nerves crept back. This wasn't just another flight, it was a test. As the crew prepared the cabin, Kelly ensured everything was perfect. She double-checked every detail, from the seating arrangements to the menu options. She wanted to show Marcus that she had changed, not just for him, but for herself. Amanda noticed Kelly's meticulousness and teased, "You're not nervous, are you?" Kelly forced a laugh. "Of course not. I just want everything to go smoothly." Amanda grinned. "You're acting like royalty is coming on board." Kelly didn't respond. In her mind, Marcus might as well have been royalty, at least to her career. Passengers began filing into the first-class cabin, and Kelly greeted each one warmly. When Marcus finally stepped aboard, dressed in a tailored blazer and carrying his familiar lunchbox, Kelly felt her chest tighten. He met her gaze and smiled, a small but unmistakable gesture of recognition. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Langston," Kelly said, her voice steady. "It's good to see you again." "Good to see you too," Marcus replied, his tone polite but measured. Kelly escorted him to his seat, making sure he was comfortable before moving on to the next passenger. She resisted the urge to overcompensate, reminding herself that action spoke louder than words. Throughout the flight, Kelly treated Marcus with the same respect and attentiveness she gave every passenger. She no longer felt the need to impress him. Her focus was on providing genuine service. Marcus, for his part, observed her quietly, his expression unreadable. During the meal service, Kelly approached Marcus with the menu. "We have several options available today, Mr. Langston. Would you like me to go over them, or do you prefer something from your lunchbox?" Marcus smiled faintly. "The lunchbox, as always, but I'll take some tea, please." "Of course," Kelly said, her tone warm. She returned with his tea moments later, ensuring everything was just right. As she set the cup down, Marcus looked up at her. "You seem different from the last time we met." Kelly paused, unsure how to respond. "I've been working on myself," she said honestly. "Trying to be better?" Marcus nodded, his expression approving. "It shows." As the flight progressed, Marcus spent most of his time reading and writing in his journal. Kelly, while busy with her duties, found herself stealing glances at him. He was as calm and composed as ever, but there was something about his presence that felt more approachable this time. Amanda noticed Kelly's focus and whispered, "Still obsessed?" "Not obsessed," Kelly said with a small smile. "Just inspired." Amanda raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Near the end of the flight, Marcus called Kelly over. She approached cautiously, unsure of what to expect. "Do you have a moment?" he asked. Of course, Kelly replied, folding her hands in front of her. Marcus gestured to the seat across from him. Sit. Kelly hesitated but complied. Marcus closed his journal and set it aside, his eyes meeting hers. You've grown since we last met. I can see it in how you carry yourself and how you treat others. Kelly felt a lump in her throat. Thank you, she said softly. That means a lot coming from you. Marcus leaned back, his expression thoughtful. It's not easy to face your flaws, let alone change them. Most people avoid it. I didn't have much choice, Kelly admitted. What happened on that flight? It made me realize I wasn't the person I thought I was. Marcus nodded. Growth often starts with discomfort. But the real test is whether you continue to improve when no one's watching. Kelly absorbed his words, feeling both encouraged and humbled. I won't stop trying, she said. I believe you, Marcus said with a small smile. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. If you ever need guidance or just want to share your progress, reach out. Kelly took the card, her hands trembling slightly. It was a simple gesture, but it felt monumental. Thank you, she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. As the flight neared its end, Marcus prepared to disembark. Kelly assisted him with his belongings, including his ever-present lunchbox. As he stood at the door, ready to leave, he turned to her one last time. Keep doing what you're doing, he said. You're on the right path. Kelly smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. Safe travels, Mr. Langston. With that, Marcus disappeared into the terminal, leaving Kelly with a sense of fulfillment she hadn't felt in years. Later that evening, Kelly sat in her apartment, staring at the business card Marcus had given her. She didn't know if she would ever contact him, but the card felt like a symbol of everything she had worked toward. A reminder that even the smallest changes could lead to something greater. She placed the card in her wallet, a quiet promise to herself that she would continue to grow, not for recognition or approval, but because it was the right thing to do. The weeks following her second encounter with Marcus Langston felt like a turning point for Kelly. She carried his words with her every day, treating them as a guide for how she wanted to live and work. Her newfound dedication didn't go unnoticed. Her supervisors praised her professionalism, and passengers left glowing reviews about her service. But she hadn't yet reached out to Marcus. The business card remained tucked safely in her wallet, a silent reminder of the man who had unknowingly transformed her perspective. One afternoon, Kelly received an email from her manager, Mr. Reynolds. The subject line caught her eye immediately. Internal opportunity, first-class training supervisor. The email explained that the airline was expanding its first-class division and looking for a team leader to oversee the onboarding and training of new staff. The role required someone with experience, excellent passenger reviews, and a commitment to Sky High's core values. Kelly's pulse quickened as she read the email. It felt like the culmination of everything she had been working toward. Yet part of her hesitated. Was she ready to lead? Could she handle the responsibility? Amanda noticed Kelly staring at her phone during their pre-flight briefing. "What's that look for?" she asked. "An opportunity," Kelly said, showing Amanda the email. Amanda's eyes widened. "You're perfect for this." Kelly shook her head. "I don't know." "Don't start doubting yourself," Amanda said firmly. "You've worked hard for this. Apply." Kelly nodded slowly, though her nerves still lingered. She decided to think it over after the flight. That evening, as Kelly scrolled through the online application for the role, she noticed something surprising in the requirements. Applicants would be interviewed by senior leadership, including a representative from the owner's office. Her heart skipped a beat. Could Marcus Langston be involved in the selection process? The thought sent a wave of anxiety through her. If Marcus was part of the panel, he would undoubtedly remember her past mistakes. But then she thought of his words on their second encounter. The real test is whether you continue to improve when no one's watching. Kelly took a deep breath and began filling out the application. A week later, Kelly received an email confirming her interview. It would take place at Sky High's corporate office, a sleek, glass-walled building that loomed over the city skyline. The interview panel would include Mr. Reynolds, another senior manager, and Marcus Langston himself. Kelly's stomach churned as she read the email. She had prepared for many things, but sitting across from Marcus in such a formal setting wasn't one of them. Still, she resolved to face the challenge head-on. This was her chance to show him and herself that she had truly changed. On the day of the interview, Kelly arrived at the corporate office early. Dressed in a crisp navy blazer and neatly tied hair, she exuded professionalism, even if her nerves threatened to betray her. When her name was called, she walked into the conference room with steady steps. Mr. Reynolds greeted her warmly, as did the other panelist. Then her eyes landed on Marcus, who was seated at the far end of the table. He smiled faintly, giving her a small nod of encouragement. "Good to see you again, Kelly," he said. "Thank you for the opportunity," Kelly replied, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. The interview began with standard questions about her experience and approach to customer service. Kelly answered confidently, drawing on her years of experience and the lessons she had learned since her first encounter with Marcus. Then Marcus leaned forward, his tone thoughtful. "Kelly, tell us about a time when you faced a challenge at work and how you handled it." Kelly knew this was her moment to address the elephant in the room. She took a deep breath. "Actually, Mr. Langston, I'd like to share something from a flight you were on." The other panelists exchanged curious glances, but Marcus's expression remained calm. "There was a time when I let my assumptions about someone affect the way I treated them," Kelly continued. "It was unprofessional and unfair. That experience taught me a lot about humility, empathy, and the importance of treating every passenger with respect, regardless of how they present themselves." She looked directly at Marcus. "I've worked hard to ensure that mistake never happens again. It's shaped how I approach my work and how I mentor my colleagues." The room was silent for a moment. Then Marcus smiled. "Thank you for your honesty, Kelly. That's exactly the kind of reflection we look for in leadership." After the interview, Kelly left the corporate office feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. She had been honest, and Marcus's response had been encouraging, but she couldn't shake the nagging doubt in the back of her mind. Amanda called her later that evening. "How'd it go?" "I think it went well," Kelly said cautiously. "But now I just have to wait." Amanda laughed. "You'll get it. I can feel it." 2 days later, Kelly received the email she had been hoping for. "Congratulations, you have been selected as the new first-class training supervisor." Tears welled up in her eyes as she read the offer letter. She had done it. The promotion wasn't just a step up in her career, it was proof that she had truly grown. That evening, Kelly pulled out the business card Marcus had given her. For the first time, she dialed the number. Marcus answered on the second ring. "This is Marcus." "Mr. Langston, it's Kelly Peterson," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "I just wanted to thank you." "For what?" Marcus asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "For everything," Kelly said. "For teaching me a lesson I didn't even realize I needed. For giving me the chance to grow." Marcus was silent for a moment before replying. "Kelly, you earned this. Your growth was your own doing. I just pointed you in the right direction." "Still," Kelly said, "I'll always be grateful." "Then make the most of it," Marcus said. Lead with the same humility you've learned. That's how you'll make a real impact. As Kelly hung up the phone, she felt a deep sense of pride. Her journey wasn't over, but she had taken the first steps toward becoming the leader she aspired to be. Her story was no longer just about redemption. It was about inspiring others to see the value in growth, humility, and second chances. Kelly's first week as the first-class training supervisor was a whirlwind of meetings, onboarding sessions, and learning the intricacies of her new role. She was now responsible for training new crew members and ensuring the airline's premium service standards were upheld across all flights. It was a daunting task, but Kelly embraced it with a determination she hadn't felt before. One of Kelly's first training sessions was with a group of recruits. Standing in front of the classroom-like setup, she took a deep breath and began her introduction. "Welcome to Sky High Airways," she said, her voice steady and warm. "You're here because you've shown the potential to deliver exceptional service. But let me tell you something I wish someone had told me when I started. Service is not about perfection. It's about respect, empathy, and treating every passenger like they matter, because they do." The recruits nodded attentively, some scribbling notes. Kelly felt a flicker of pride as she continued, weaving in lessons from her own journey without explicitly naming Marcus. "I made mistakes in my early days," she admitted. "I judged people based on appearances, and I let my assumptions get in the way of doing my job. But those mistakes taught me something invaluable. Every passenger has a story, and it's our job to treat them with kindness no matter who they are." Her words resonated with the recruits. After the session, one of them approached her. "Your honesty really inspired me," the recruit said. "I hope I can learn to approach passengers with the same mindset." Kelly smiled. "You're already on the right track." Not everyone was receptive to Kelly's leadership style. Some senior crew members, accustomed to the old ways, grumbled about her emphasis on empathy and humility. One evening, during a team debriefing, a senior flight attendant named Greg voiced his skepticism. "Look, Kelly, I get what you're trying to do," he said. "But let's be real. First-class passengers expect perfection, not hand-holding." Kelly met his gaze evenly. "Perfection isn't just about the service, Greg. It's about how we make people feel. You'd be surprised how far a little kindness can go." Greg crossed his arms but said nothing more. Over time, Kelly made a point of showing, not just telling, the value of her approach. Slowly but surely, even the skeptics began to come around. One evening, as Kelly was reviewing training materials in her office, she received a message from Marcus Langston. It was brief, but it brought a smile to her face. "Keep leading with purpose. You're making a difference." M.L. Kelly saved the message, feeling a renewed sense of motivation. Marcus's quiet support reminded her why she had taken on this role in the first place. Under Kelly's leadership, the first-class crew began to shift toward a culture of respect and empathy. Passengers noticed the difference, often leaving positive feedback about how they felt genuinely valued during their flights. One day, Kelly received a particularly touching letter from a passenger. It read, "I've flown first class many times, but this was the first time I felt like more than just a ticket. Your crew treated me with such kindness. It made a difficult trip much easier. Thank you for setting that tone." Kelly framed the letter and hung it in her office, a reminder of the impact she could have. As Kelly settled into her role, a new challenge emerged. Sky High Airways announced a major expansion into international markets, which meant onboarding dozens of new crew members in a short time frame. The pressure to maintain the airline standards while scaling up was immense. Kelly worked tirelessly, often staying late to refine training programs and ensure consistency. Amanda noticed the strain and voiced her concern one evening. "You've been working non-stop, Kelly. Don't burn yourself out." Kelly sighed, leaning back in her chair. I just want this to go well. It will, Amanda said. You've already made such a difference. Trust your team. They've learned from the best. During the height of the expansion efforts, Kelly was asked to oversee a high-profile flight carrying VIPs to an international summit in Geneva. She accepted, eager to reconnect with the day-to-day operations she had grown to love. As she reviewed the manifest, her heart skipped a beat. Marcus Langston's name was listed among the passengers. When Marcus boarded the flight, Kelly greeted him with the same warmth she gave every passenger. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Langston," she said, her smile genuine. "Thank you, Kelly," Marcus replied, his tone carrying a hint of pride. "Good to see you again." Throughout the flight, Kelly carried out her duties with the confidence of someone who had truly grown into her role. Marcus watched her quietly, his approval evident in his occasional nods. Near the end of the flight, Marcus called Kelly over. She approached with a calm professionalism that belied the nerves fluttering in her chest. "You've built something remarkable here," Marcus said, gesturing to the crew. "The culture you've fostered, it's exactly what I envisioned for Sky High." Kelly felt a lump in her throat. "Thank you, Mr. Langston. That means more than you know." Marcus's gaze softened. "You've earned it." "Never doubt that." As the plane landed in Geneva, Kelly felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Her journey had come full circle, but she knew this was just the beginning. She wasn't just leading a team, she was shaping the future of Sky High Airways, one crew member at a time. And in the back of her mind, she knew Marcus would always be watching, not as a critic, but as a quiet supporter, cheering her on as she continued to grow. Months turned into a year, and Kelly had firmly established herself as a leader within Sky High Airways. The airline's expansion into international markets was a success, and feedback from passengers highlighted a noticeable difference in the first-class experience. Kelly's influence had permeated the culture, creating a ripple effect that extended far beyond her immediate team. But for Kelly, her journey wasn't just about professional achievements. It was about the personal transformation she had undergone, starting from that fateful flight with Marcus Langston. One morning, Kelly received an email marked "Confidential." It was an invitation to a private event hosted by Marcus Langston, celebrating Sky High's milestone of becoming one of the top-rated luxury airlines globally. The event was to be held at the Langston Estate, an exclusive venue that few employees had ever visited. The email included a personal note from Marcus. "Your leadership has been instrumental in our success. I'd be honored to have you join us at this celebration." ML. Kelly felt a surge of pride and nervousness. This wasn't just a party, it was a moment of recognition for everything she had worked toward. The Langston Estate was a sprawling property surrounded by manicured gardens and modern architecture. Kelly arrived early, dressed in an elegant but understated gown. As she walked through the grand entrance, she couldn't help but marvel at the setting. It was a world far removed from her humble beginnings as a flight attendant. Inside, the atmosphere was vibrant yet intimate. Executives, managers, and key staff mingled, sharing stories of their contributions to Sky High's success. Marcus was at the center of it all, moving through the room with his signature calm and approachable demeanor. When Marcus spotted Kelly, his face lit up with a warm smile. He excused himself from a conversation and approached her. "Kelly," he said, extending his hand, "I'm so glad you could make it." "Thank you for inviting me," Kelly replied, shaking his hand. "This is incredible." Marcus gestured for her to join him at a quieter corner of the room. "I've been meaning to tell you something," he said. "When I first met you, I saw potential, but I also saw someone who needed a nudge to realize it." Kelly smiled, a mix of gratitude and humility washing over her. "That nudge changed everything." Marcus nodded. "And look at what you've accomplished. You've not only grown as a person, but helped shape the culture of this airline, that's a legacy worth celebrating. As the evening progressed, Marcus took the stage to address the guests. The room fell silent as he began to speak. "Tonight, we celebrate more than just a milestone," Marcus said. "We celebrate the people who make this airline what it is. Sky High isn't just about luxury, it's about the experience, the connections, and the values we uphold." He paused, scanning the room. One person here embodies those values in a way that has transformed not just her team, but our entire first-class service. Kelly Peterson, please stand. Kelly froze, her heart racing. She hadn't expected to be singled out in front of everyone. Slowly, she rose from her seat, her cheeks flushed with surprise and pride. "Kelly's journey is a testament to growth and resilience," Marcus continued. "She took a moment of self-reflection and turned it into a force for positive change. Her leadership reminds us all that humility and respect are the foundation of exceptional service." The room erupted into applause, and Kelly felt tears prick at her eyes. It was a moment she would never forget. After the speeches, Marcus found Kelly again. "I meant every word," he said. "You've proven what this airline stands for." "Thank you," Kelly said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll never forget what you taught me." Marcus smiled. "The best way to honor that is to keep growing, and to help others do the same." "I will," Kelly promised. As the evening wound down, Kelly stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. She looked up at the night sky, thinking about how far she had come since her first encounter with Marcus Langston. The lessons she had learned about humility, growth, and treating others with respect had not only shaped her career, but her entire outlook on life. She thought about the recruits she was training, the passengers she had impacted, and the colleagues who now looked up to her. Her journey wasn't just about redemption, it was about creating a legacy that would continue to inspire others. As she walked back inside, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She was no longer the judgmental flight attendant who mocked a passenger's lunchbox. She was a leader, a mentor, and a person who had learned the true value of humility and growth. And somewhere in the crowd, Marcus Langston watched her with quiet pride, knowing that the small act of challenging her assumptions had set something extraordinary in motion.